What is up, guys? Lord Nick here, bringing you another League of Legends related video. In this video, I'm going into a kind of deep analysis of the Pentanet.gg versus Cloud9 game. This is in the second round robin of the Rumble stage. This was a make or break game for Cloud9. As you see here, they were 2-5 versus the 0-7 Pentanet. They were favored to beat them as they had already beaten them before. With that, they are expected to, if they win this and continue to win their next remaining game or two, that I can't remember if there was two left. I think there was two left after this. If they win all of them, they have a chance at tie-breaking Mad Lions. And even if they just win one, they still had a chance, as long as Mad Lions continue to lose. Which, FYI, if they'd won this game, they actually had that opportunity. But I think this game also broke some of their momentum because they lost to the singular worst team at this point in the stage. And that's not saying that Pentanet is bad or anything, but let's kind of compare elements of practice before we get into the draft here of why Cloud9 should be favored in this game, even outside of just the standings in the current tournament. Pentanet is in a region that is no longer supported by Riot, right? The OCE had been disbanded. They now have the LCO, I think is what it's called, which is now being put on by ESL, a third-party group that also runs a lot of Counter-Strike tournaments and such. They are now running the Oceania's league because Riot disbanded it. So there's a lot less money in the league than there was when Riot was running it, but Riot got rid of it saying, hey, we can't really afford this. We'll just say that any of your players that want to try out for North America can do so without being called imports, which is a huge boost for some of the people that were good enough to do that, but also it really kind of hurt the scene. But because of this, when ESL picked it up, they didn't have a league established, and they still don't have a full-on league established. They played one tournament to determine which team was going to represent OCE in MSI. Pentanet won that one, and they won so in pretty dominant fashion against most of the other teams. They looked pretty good, and even in their own group stage, they looked pretty okay. You know, they were taking it pretty seriously, and they were doing relatively well against a much better version of how they played in RNG. These guys very much focus on team fighting and their ability to also win in lanes, and then Pabu's ability to roam around the map, farming and helping secure objectives and fighting in river for control. That being said, they've been outclassed quite greatly by the other teams here, and most of the dynamics of these other teams are coming from established regions. The fact that they even made it to the Rumble stage was just super impressive in general. Like, this team has very limited stage practice, and outside of maybe some scrims, they really didn't have much actual practice even coming from their own region. So them making it this far is pretty impressive. Them winning any game would be super impressive and massive underdog story. Meanwhile, look at Cloud9. They are in, yes, arguably the weakest major region, not even arguably, the weakest major region, arguably the strongest minor region, and even then, that's arguable. I think Brazil and Turkey have shown that they're pretty dominative as well. They just unfortunately pulled some really hard games. Anyhow, we're looking at Cloud9 coming off of pretty dominating fashion to a small degree in NA, and I say to a small degree because they were strong. They were obviously the strongest team coming out of North America because they had the least number of problems. They started off a little rocky, and they consistently seemed to get better and better and better, and then into playoffs they seemed a bit rocky again, but all the other teams seemed worse, and it just felt like NA as a region kind of felt a little bit worse this last split. And so while they still had a lot more practice, you'd still expect them to have practice against better caliber teams because, FYI, a lot of those teams also had people from the OCE. So even if you're going into the OCE, you're playing against what were their best players in your own region, and now you're coming against another OCE team here. So even if Pentanet is now kind of this newly established, OCE or different type of stuff because these are slightly newer players, you're still playing against people on your regular season that are better versions of these guys in some cases. Now, Cloud9 throughout this tournament showcased a lot of issues on their fundamental understanding of how to execute things as a team. They felt very divided at times, and other times they felt like they were just a very, very strong team. They've won a couple of games in this tournament against high-end Korean and Chinese teams. They won against RNG, and they have won against Damwon. That's impressive. That means they have a chance to do something here. So that's what makes this particular game even more upsetting to know, is that somehow you lose to a team that is struggling against all the people in this part of the stage, and they even struggled against you in your first game against them, and you still somehow lost. But let's kind of break down what goes on. And I think that starts really heavily in their drafting phase. So we've kind of established that both these teams have a very different setup from where they're coming from. Cloud9 is in an organized league that has a lot of practice, has a lot of games, has gotten a lot of experience over the spring split. No matter how rocky it was, they had a lot of it. Pentanet only had one tournament prior to this. So maybe Pentanet is set up a little bit better to a small degree because they've already been in a tournament structure. So they're coming into a tournament structure from a tournament. Meanwhile, Cloud9's coming in from a league into a tournament. But even then, Cloud9 went tournament, league, tournament. Like, they've had a lot of experience as this team. And they somehow have still yet to find a core identity to each other to play around each other. And I think this draft really showcases that. This draft really, to me, felt like they were disrespecting Pentanet in this. They felt like they could just pick champions that were somewhat comfort picks, it kind of felt like, to a degree. And just kind of bully Pentanet out that way by just being on comfort picks because they felt they were better players. Note, Pentanet are really good players still. There's a reason they are still here, and there's a reason they made it to the Rumble stage over somebody like U of L, who are the best players from their region multiple times over. Now, note, U of L looked like they might have not been the caliber that they were last year, and even in their own league, they looked a little bit rockier than they had in previous years. So there's a little bit of like an asterisk on how well they did in terms of beating the U of L this year for Pentanet, I mean. But still, they managed to beat a team that was been together for a while in U of L, who I think arguably could also fight this current version of Cloud9 just as successfully. So we're going to move into the actual draft here. I just kind of wanted to set all this up here ahead of time, but as we move into the draft, the bans are relevant, of course, because bans are always relevant in draft, but in this particular game, I don't know how relevant these bans are. I don't know how much of these actually would structure a change in how C9 drafted. I think it does redirect to a small degree how Pentanet drafted. You know, taking away Gnar means that BioPanther is going to be on something a little bit more aggressive. They take away the Lee, which means that we're kind of looking at two of the top, you know, kind of bruisery picks in the top lane are gone. I guess Decoy is known as a good Thresh. I saw a few of his performances on it. I don't know if maybe they're just afraid of Thresh. But with these type of bans, it looks like Cloud9 is setting up for a certain comp that they're really kind of worried about. Or they're just not putting thoughts into these bans. Now, getting rid of the Renekton is kind of interesting. This is a high prio pick at this tournament, and I want to stop here for a moment and talk about that, and then we can talk about the Udyr. Renekton has been high prio in this entire tournament, despite some top analysts like LS hating this champion with a passion. A big part of that is that he is an early game bruiser. He is about Lingness dominance, and he also has a point-and-click stun. And I think that's the part that most people end up looking at him for. Like, you can argue, you know, it's kind of lane dominance, or he's kind of bruisery, he does a lot of damage, he's a backline threat. I honestly have to think that the real reason people want him is because he has that point-and-click stun. Much like why Leona is so pressured at this tournament. You know, that one thing that you can't dodge their version of CC just makes all these more skill-oriented champions kind of match up a little bit better, or makes your carries be able to hit them a little bit better. To be honest, you know, the few times that we saw Renekton here, we saw it like paired with, for instance, in like the Damwon Kia game, he's paired with a Nidalee, which is generally somebody you pick so that you have a for sure CC, so the Nidalee spear hits, so they can go in and kill people, and it worked out for them. As for banning it against them, I don't really know how terrifying BioPanther's Renekton is, or if Chaz's Renekton is any good. We saw Chaz predominantly on mages, so I don't honestly understand why this is a ban coming in from them, especially when they have now not banned any of the top junglers, which means that BioPanther has option to Rumble, Udyr, Morgana, any of them he could pick, and so far not BioPanther, sorry, Pabu has offered an option for any of these champions. And they go with the Udyr. Now note, Udyr I think is not nearly as good as some of these other champions could be, but the execution of Udyr has been tested and played out through these teams for a lot longer. Rumble and Morgana are kind of new. They were only maybe a patch or two before this, and even then, they had maybe 2-3 weeks to practice on these picks. These aren't really picks that were common before then, so none of the junglers really had a whole lot of practice on them. Exception maybe being towards kind of Korean guys who had some of that play, Korean and Chinese guys who just kind of play weird things anyways. Rumble has been strong for a while. It's just the buff of his passive that made him better. Morgana, I don't think anybody really had any real play, but she's not terribly difficult, and that was the point of why she's so strong. Anyhow, Udyr is a comfort pick for Pabu, and it's obviously a comfort pick because he goes to it a lot in this tournament, and a lot of people go to it in this tournament. This is a pick that they've played all season long, so this means that, this is a comfort, which I think you should be trying to deny comfort. Doesn't matter if you think you're a better team than them, deny comfort on him. Like I said, the Thresh ban seems kind of odd, and as we go into the draft later, it becomes even more odd because of how they drafted. So now we continue. Let's see here. You know what? We can actually full screen this. Haha, look actually somewhat professional. Oh, my thing is in the way. Let's move my camera real quick here so we can see the picks that get picked here. So for first and second pick, we are looking at Kai'Sa Nautilus. Now, as a pairing for a bot lane, this isn't that bad. I personally don't really like them picking both of their bot laners here, though. As you've now seen an Udyr is picked. Might as well just take your jungler. Neither Morgana or Rumble are really countered by laners too much. Both of these picks are picked for being able to match Udyr in farming. And if you want a Kai'Sa, you're kind of looking to scale a little bit, so you could go with a farming jungler, and then you can save your support to be less aggressive oriented. Nautilus is very aggressive. He wants to go in, he wants to make plays. That being said, this is still an okay spot for them to be picking it. I just really would have favored them picking a jungler over Nautilus right now, or even if they just hover this and then switch to a jungler. I mean, you're telling them you want to go Nautilus at that point, which gives them, you're giving too much info here because they end up going with Nautilus. And so this isn't the worst of drafts, but I mean, you already had an advantage where you could hide maybe your ADC. So Pentanet does something good here because they've now shown their bot lane. You have an Udyr, which you're not really afraid of him getting counterpicked because nobody counterpicks him. There's so many things you can use to counterpick him. I think Trundle is a particularly good counterpick into Udyr, because he just nullifies the mid game of what Udyr wants to do. And then you have a big damagey threat, also somewhat good peel threat. It's a pick that nobody's picking up, but that's from my own experience of playing a lot of Trundle and playing into the Udyr meta for so long. I'm pretty comfortable playing Trundle into it. I don't know how many of these pros do, but I imagine it's not that hard. He's a pretty basic champion. I think he's even easier than like Morgana, for instance, outside of having to land the pillar. But even then, it's not like if you miss the pillar, oh no, I have to wait for it to come off cooldown. No, I mean, it's more integral if you miss a Morgana Q. But anyhow, either way, they go with a really good read here and go into Senna Tahm Kench, which is now daring their Nautilus pick to go in. Means their Nautilus can't do shit in this lane, by the way. And for any of you that don't know why Senna Tahm Kench is such a popular pick together and why it's so good in a bot lane, is the two of them synergize in a way that is extremely cancerous to deal with in the lane. You really want to be able to stop Senna from scaling. Well, it's really hard to do that when you have a Tahm Kench that can stand behind her, eat her, and pull her away. Meanwhile, you want to be able to punish the Tahm Kench in the lane when he steps up, but you really can't do that because Senna then just stands behind him and heals him up or gives him a untargetable with her E. And you're just in a situation here where fighting them is just not a good option unless you can allocate a ton of resources to do it. But then in doing that, that means you need to have more aggressive picks throughout the map that are able to do so. So at this point, what you were telling the Nautilus he has to do with picking Tahm Kench and Senna is that he has to be looking elsewhere with this Nautilus to make aggressive plays. He can't stay in lane because if he stays in lane, it's just feeding into what Tahm Kench Senna wants to do. They want to scale, and it doesn't matter that your Kai'Sa wants to scale because Senna's going to outrange her and Senna's going to out-damage her in the late game. It's just how it goes. That's just how it works. It's a really hard lane to deal with in lane without allocating a ton of resources from your jungler and another laner. And it's near impossible to deal with in the late game unless you have really, really good dive threats coming from jungle or top. So that being said, what do you think that they need to be picking here? So what they should be picking here is either a very heavy dive threat oriented mid laner. Perks has been playing Yone before. It's a solid blind pick. It's, there's some things that would be bad into, but if you pick your mid laner here, while that's never you never generally want to draft your mid lane blind, it then augments what your team wants to do and gives you a lot of dive threats that even Tom Kench can't be like, well, I can protect against this. He can't. I mean, Yone is so dangerous because of his ultimate that even with the Tom Kench, if they group up like they want to try to, be this ball of you can't kill us, Yone doesn't care. At some point, he's going to hit an item break and kill them all. So you could be doing that, or you could look for a Rumble, for instance, do a Rumble and do a slightly different build path that some reason none of the pros had been doing. They all been doing Night Harvester for early contest of damage, which I think is dumb, because that's when Udyr's good. But if you just decide to go, hey, let's not do for early damage Rumble, but do for mid to late game damage Rumble, of which you take Leandri's, because then you can burn through tanks. It's easier for you to poke people in the back line. It gives you the same amount of cooldown reduction, and yeah, while the mana's wasted, the item itself allows you to burn tanks a lot more efficiently, and it burns other people a lot more efficiently. It makes your Q do more damage. It makes your E do more damage, opposed to just having a little bit of uploaded, front-loaded burst on there. You're gonna have a lot more consistent damage, which just adds into your team comp. So they could look for one of these couple of picks here potentially, right? Like this is something that Cloud9 could punish this Tahm Kench Senna with by picking something that says, well, we don't have to get near you to hurt you. That's some good ideas for it. Even if maybe they decided let's do an Orianna. Orianna can really disrupt a Tahm Kench Senna comp. Yeah, it kind of becomes hard for her, but then if you draft some type of divey jungle or top, it then allows you to also get in there. On top of that, you could also just look for a top laner here. If you just, for some reason, they're like, you know what, Fudge is going to be playing weak side, but we want him to be engaging. Well, I mean, Ornn hasn't been seen in a while, but Ornn is still really good for disrupting Senna Tahm Kench. He engages from a long distance away. Tom is going to have to probably eat Senna beforehand, or they're going to have to burn some summoners to try to avoid the Ornn Horn, and then all the follow-up engage that can come from it. There's a lot of picks they can go with here to really nullify Senna Tahm Kench. They can't do it in lane now, but they can look for it into the mid-game, something that nullifies them. But then they go with something that I think is probably the biggest mistake of their draft. And let's just showcase it here. Let's just wait, and I'll let them do the pick here. I'm going to drink some water while they show why I think they made the biggest mistake. 3, 2, 1, and come on. There it is. Sorry, I had a little bit of second off there. They pick Lilia. So, if you don't know, towards the beginning of the meta of Udyr Hecarim, Lilia was also seen a lot. And the reason Lilia was seen a lot is she could keep up with them. She's decent at early skirmishes. And as the game goes on, with proper comboing and such like that, Lilia can be super, super strong in a team fight. That being said, there are 3 type of things that Lilia does not really like. Point and click stun. Well, does PGG have that? Well, yeah, they do. They have it in Udyr. She doesn't like easy to hit slows, because even though she becomes somewhat resilient to slows because she's so damn fast, any slow is really effective against her because her movement speed goes so high. If it's a percentage at all slow, she gets slowed quite a bit. If it's a flat slow, she doesn't care. But if it's a percentage slow, which most slows are, she's going to drop a lot of movement speed really fast and become extremely easy to kill. Well, guess what? Senna is most likely going Glacial Senna, because right now they're not showing any real damage. So right now you have to presume she's going Glacial Senna, which means you're gonna get slowed from an auto attack from a mile before you go in. That is stupider than all hell, because now that you're slowed, she can easily throw a W out on you, and your ability to dodge is going to be bad, and you're either going to have to try to flash a little too soon and miss your flash to go in, or you're going to have to flash away, which means you still can't flash to go in. All in all, you get countered by Senna's range just as badly as your laners are going to get countered by Senna's range. I think this is a terrible read by Cloud9 in this particular pick, just because what they're setting up for with these 3 picks is saying we're going to have a lot of dive threat here. So it's still recoverable, but I think Lilia is a mistake. Like I said, Rumble would have been a good pick here. Maybe Trundle. I mean, Trundle's not great for the idea that I gave before of having an engage of some sort. But you were putting your engage on somebody who's super squishy and super counterable by what the enemy team already kind of has. And it's not the singular worst pick to be made. There are some that are worse. They could have gone with Hecarim here. Yes, Hecarim has fallen out of favor. Yes, Hecarim's not that great as a full tank anymore, but he's not terrible as a full tank. Udyr cannot punish him still. He still has a relatively good fast early clear. He can keep up with Udyr. And by the way that Blabber ends up playing this game, Hecarim would have been a better pick because he offers immediate engage threat that they can't stop nearly as easily. His ultimate goes in and they cannot stop it. Senna slowing him? Yeah, he does less damage, but it doesn't matter. His job is to hit that R and disrupt their team composition so that the rest of his team can get in there and get a messy fight going and kill them all. If you leave them as a ball that this squad wants to be right now, so far, the PGG's team wants to stay as a, right now, their three-man core here, these three that are showing, want to stay kind of grouped together with Udyr slightly ahead, and then these two kind of support him with a, you go too far, I eat you, get you out, or I heal you, or we could stay in this fight longer. They're going to look for messy, scrappy, long fights where they get to stay close together. You need some form of disruption. Lilia is not really a great form of disruption here. I think Cloud9 goes on to play the pick pretty okay, but I think the pick itself is just not offering enough of what Cloud9 needs to disrupt them. You're not picking like you are ahead in the draft right now. You are behind in the draft, and you just picked a pick that is kind of handshaky a little bit. Because she can't really invade Udyr to steal his camps. He clears as fast as she does. So they should be finishing their camps pretty well, unless Udyr goes for ganks. Right now, he is showcasing a lane that he does not want to gank, because their lane doesn't want anybody to be fighting in that lane. They want to sit there and handshake. Right now, your lane wants to be aggressive, so you should be looking for maybe an aggressive early jungler who can then go and pressure another lane so that your Nautilus pick doesn't seem like he's freaking useless. Anyhow, let's continue with the draft here. We're going to, again, like I said, bans generally matter in a lot of drafts. And outside of the first three bans here, I don't really know, like, okay, you're taking away Urgot. What about that comp tells you that they're going to go with Urgot here? Urgot is, yeah, pretty okay when you're pushing into him, but at most in a top lane, you might be worried more of like a GP pick here because of the fact that they want you to come into them, and GP's really good at zoning going into them. Now, maybe Biopanther's Urgot is just disgustingly strong. Maybe I don't know enough about the player here to understand why they're banning this. But to me, Urgot feels like a really bad read based off of what your comp's already doing and what their comp's kind of doing. They need something with a little bit more punch based off of the lack of damage the team currently holds. Banning the Syndra is fine. I think of their bans, the pick that I have least issues with is the Syndra ban and the Gnar ban. And the only reason the Syndra ban I'm having less issues with is because of how she likes to play. And the fact that Chaz likes to play Syndra. He has played it before, he likes to play it, and the way she plays actually would disrupt a lot of what Cloud9 wants to do. The Yone ban is a very good read by them. This is a very good second tier ban, which means they cannot pick it. This is why I said maybe pick it before the ban comes through, because there's not a whole lot of things he could potentially pick that's going to just shut him out of the game. Perks has already showcased his ability to play it. So now let's talk about the top lane picks that just came through. Cloud9 wants to give final pick to Perks for him to have counter. That being said, they're now telling Fudge, you're playing weak side. Even though we have drafted absolutely nothing to assist our bot side currently. There's nothing here in our comp that's going to make our bot side just win lane now, even though their lane is nearly impossible for them to win on their own. And we're going to insta-lock you Scion so you can play weak side. The only real issue I have with this pick is, while yes, he will run into their big ball of people, you have left a pick that Biopanther loves to play, that while he can't really beat you up in lane with, he can use in later team fights to destroy you with, and Biopanther has played it before and he has showcased it, and that is Set. Set has been rising slowly in popularity with all the buffs that he'd been receiving, and on top of that, he's a really good answer when they don't have a super strong all-in engage. Right now, Cloud9's only engage prior to the Scion was Nautilus. You now have Scion, who is a person that can generally be ignored by most of the people on the team of PGG. Cool. He can jump on the Tahm Kench. Kind of. If he jumps in with his ultimate, he's going to get ultied out almost immediately by the set unless he hits the set. But if he's hitting the set with the ultimate, that's not the target you want to hit with your ultimate. So right now, Cloud9 has just said we're sacrificing top lane so that we can get a better pick in the mid lane. This is a strategy that people do. I'm okay with it to a degree. Like I said, I've already had some issues with how they're drafting, but they're kind of not drafting into countering PGG at all. They're kind of drafting into, we have a concept that we want to go with, it seems, and they're kind of going with that. So let's take a look here. Final pick for PGG. I know it's going to be Victor, but let me tell you it's Victor. So PGG makes a mistake by picking Victor. The reason it's a mistake, well, normally it would be a mistake, is because there's a Nautilus that now has a lane that he can go and exploit. Victor has a nice stun and has the ability to kind of peel for himself to a small degree. The problem Victor has is he lacks a lot of early damage. So if Cloud9 now picks an aggressive early laner who can get assistance from his support, roaming up, because Tahm Kench can't roam, so Senna would have to roam, which is a terrible roam for them in comparison to having a Nautilus there. And then on top of that, Senna's not getting her stacks and not getting her stuff. So, like, PGG's bot lane is locked in and staying in bot lane. They cannot really roam. They will give up so much XP, gold, and stuff that they can't really roam. It's just how it is. So you've picked Victor, a person who needs assistance in the early game to survive. You have an early game jungler versus another jungler who does similar things to him. Lilia can actually do pretty well against Udyr in just an isolated Udyr versus Lilia. If he plays it correctly, he can space it properly, use his abilities, and unless Udyr blows flash, Lilia's fine, and even then, Lilia can blow her flash afterwards and space it back out and make it very hard for Udyr to do anything. In fights, Udyr's really annoying for Lilia because if he just stuns her before she tries to go in, she kind of dies. Or is forced to use Zhonya's, or a number of other things. Maybe has to one-man ulti. In fights, Udyr is good to Lilia. In isolation, Lilia is good to Udyr. Victor is bad here because he is kind of hard to lane on his own right now. He has the sufficient ability, if he's not being pressured, Victor will do fine, he'll farm up, he'll get his items, and he'll do great in team fights. And he adds a lot of zoning pressure, and team composition-wise, that is what it looks like the PGG wants to do. So far, Cloud9 also wants to team fight, but has yet to select anything that really argues that they can go in effectively against what PGG has drafted. Like I said, the set will now disengage any person that you come in with an engage on, or if your Kai'Sa jumps too far, or if maybe your Lilia jumps too far. Like, there's so many disengage options that set offers to their team now for PGG. PGG's draft looks stronger on paper right now. I mean, they have 5-4, so yeah, that makes sense. The fifth pick here is arguably where I lost a lot of faith in Cloud9's drafting here, because they hover Zoe here. And I think with their team composition, Zoe would be effectively what they want to have happen. There's more CC, longer range poke. It's a lot harder for PGG to do anything into you, but you don't have to commit nearly going in as hard with your team. You take Tristana, which now says you have to jump into the enemy team with your carry, and then your other carry wants to do that too, and your tanks need to get in, but your tanks have no way to get to the back line. Your tanks have no way of getting past Udyr, Set, Tahm Kench to get to Victor and Senna. Because guess what? Victor and Senna now outrange your carries. Early on in lane, Tristana is really good at pushing, but Victor's really good at nullifying pushing. So unless Tristana can all in on the Victor, which she cannot if he has his W placement properly, their lane means nothing, and that means Tristana can't get to the tower. That means Tristana can't push as hard as she needs to. She now needs severe jungler help and severe help from roams from their support. So there's something they can do. Cloud9 has options here still, mind you. Cloud9 can do things to make their comp work, but they are severely lacking in an identity of how they win the game. They have an idea of what their core team identity is, but their win-con identity is just not there. What does Sion add that somebody who could have, okay, so Sion, not the worst pick in the world. You're blind picking it. They pick Set. It's a solid counter pick by them, but you want to give your counter to your mid, right? Like, your draft fundamentals here, like, the understanding of why Cloud9 made their picks in the order that they did made sense, but some of the picks just didn't make sense. Blabber's pick, for instance, made no sense to me. You could have picked Rumble. You could have picked Morgana. Yes, Blabber isn't the greatest of Morganas. Yes, he's probably not the greatest of Rumbles either. But both of those picks work better for the identity of what your team wants to do. On top of that, the Trist, I think, is just one of the bigger mistakes they make here. In a vacuum, Trist does not beat Victor. It's kind of a skill matchup to a degree, and you're just expecting that Perks is just going to, stomp over Chaz. Chaz is good at playing into better mid laners. He has played into nothing but better mid laners this entire tournament, and he did not look like an uber weak point in most of those games. There were a couple of those games, of course, where he just played kind of poorly. But in most of his laning phases, he survives, he lives through it, and then his team have to try to win through some unfortunately bad team fighting in comparison to some of the other teams. Chaz has not been like hard inting every game though. And Perks has not been like hard dominating every game. Perks has done well in most of his games, but he has not been like hard smurfing in all of his games. So you are now saying we believe that our mid is so much better that we're going to take a very 50-50-ish kind of mid pick here, that if ours does not get ahead, yours will outscale and destroy. So let's kind of move into the game here, shall we? Let's take a look at how this game goes in. So we're going to skip ahead into the game. So let's get into the actual meat of the game where it's actually starting. So nothing has happened at this point. Lanes have started, people are taking farm. As you expect, Sion's kind of backing from the wave because early on, level 1, Sion can't really fight the Set. So he's kind of letting Set do what he wants to do. Set's coming over here, beating up the Sion, saying, get out of my lane. Meanwhile, Cloud9 is doing something kind of smart in their bot lane here. They are allowing the enemy bot lane to push into them. Because Senna can't, Tahm Kench, while pushing is not the worst idea for... It's not the worst thing in the world for them. They don't want to overextend, because if Blabber, for whatever reason, started on blue side and does a very, very early gank here, they are in a world of hurt because they're going to have to burn their flashes to get away from this. Now, Pabu is down here to potentially counter gank, and you know most of the time Blabber's going to be topside, and they caught a ward on it, knowing Blabber's topside. If you couldn't tell, there's a ward right here that Blabber, when he cleared his Krugs, they saw him do. Which means now that PGG has no fear. Their jungler's down here, the enemy jungler's not. The enemy team can't really engage on them. They can just hard shove this wave and potentially go for a cheater back and get a small item advantage, and then potentially roam decoy, which is something they should not be able to do. But C9's playing with some respect. They want to potentially try to freeze the wave about where Vulcan is standing, to try to deny Decoy the ability to farm, because that far forward, Tahm Kench can't play that far forward on his own. Even with Senna supporting him, that far forward, like I said, will leave him potentially gank prone to Blabber in the future. So, most likely PGG just needs to shove this and go back. That's just kind of what they need to do, and hope that maybe Sven and Vulcan break it, or they need to get it shoved into the tower. Which could be potentially risky, but Pabu is here. Like I said, Pabu is here. They can shove this, they can get it set to the tower so that you cannot freeze it here, and it resets it to the middle, which is more beneficial to Decoy and Praedyth. So, right now, they're now punishing them. Vulcan decides to try to go in and punish Praedyth for stepping forward, which I think is just it's a bit of an aggressive move that could have been potentially thwarted a little bit better and punished a little bit more. But look at what happens mid here. So Perks has pushed it in, and Chaz is equal to him in CS. And Perks didn't get to do any damage to the tower because Chaz could stop it right before it gets to his tower. So level 2 comes in. Vulcan wants to go in and push them. Well, guess what? Senna Tahm Kench says no. That's the story of this lane. That's the story of how this lane will always go out. Senna Tahm Kench will say no. That's just what they're designed to do. So now Blabber is on the bot side here. They have their ward knowing that Blabber will be coming down here eventually. BioPanther is very aware of the fact that he is no longer on this side, so he can continue to push the Sion. Blabber could have made an early attempt to go up there and punish him for pushing the Sion, but it doesn't really net you anything if Sion's ahead. Sion's good at just scaling and being a big beefy frontlaner. So to Blabber's, Blabber's going around just farming. So now they're looking for this engage. Blabber starts showing himself on a ward. they hook Praedyth again, which is the person you cannot hook. It's the person you normally should hook, but in a Senna Tahm Kench lane, you cannot hook Senna because Tahm Kench will just eat her, and then you can't do anything. Like, you don't get to punish anything anymore. You don't get to do anything. They're down 6 CS, but that's not that big a deal. Senna's getting stacks. Senna's stacking up. It's not a big deal. So at this point, Cloud9 are shoving in their waves, but like they're gaining nothing in the early game, which is fine. I mean, you're not expecting a whole lot of aggression or pressure coming in this early in the game. There have been some small lane mismanagements here. So with Vulcan not backing, this is actually really, really smart if Perks hadn't backed as well. So Perks is coming back to lane. Chaz hasn't backed yet. So they want to try to punish Chaz, but you know, you now have your Nautilus coming in behind. Perks is not even close to lane yet, and the wave is kind of frozen in front of Chaz's tower. You, as a Nautilus, can't get in position to potentially punish him unless you were timed with this cannon wave, and Perks was here at this cannon wave already. He wasn't. He'd already backed, but off of timing, they can't find anything there. This is bad. Chaz hasn't backed yet. Yes, Perks has damage advantage. Chaz is just damage control, though. He doesn't need to win the lane. He doesn't need to get ahead in the lane. He just needs to farm, and he just needs XP. And he just needs to sit there and not allow Perks to be able to do anything. Which, guess what? Where the lane state is very bad for Perks. Perks is now trying to stop Chaz from farming, which, again, like I just said, it doesn't matter if Chaz is farming or not as much. But Pabu comes here, make sure that we clear it out, because Phoenix Stance allows him to do that. There's some little bit of what looks like some potential counterplay and maybe some plays that would have been made by Cloud9 here. Perks is in a kind of bad position here. Decoy is up here, which I think is a small mistake because of the giant wave down there. He's going to miss a lot of XP. So this is a bad play by them. And I think that Cloud9 does good by coming in here and forcing him off, and now we can go get the dragon. So this is executed well by Cloud9. This is how they should be running their game. This is how their team needs to be executing the game. Sven is safe in the bot lane by himself. Vulcan hanging around here is really, really good. Chaz is hovering on the top side there. Vulcan has his flash and such. He could have potentially looped back around because he knows he doesn't have a ward there and go behind the wall there and then look to hook him again. But he just decides not to commit to it. And I think that's a small mistake. I don't think it really... They wouldn't have lost anything for him trying to do that, except for the fact that they lost track of where Udyr was. But they have to assume Udyr is on the top side of the map. He's not contesting Drake. He's not down here doing his bot side camps. You have to assume he's on the top side of the map, which means that even if you went in, as long as you play to the bot side of the map, he can't really get to you, and you have two other members in bot side river. So you're going to have numbers advantage before his. Senna Tahm Kench don't have their ultis. They can't really assist. Biopanther's ulti is not going to mean shit. It doesn't matter that he has TP. If he TP's in there, you've already engaged and done your damages. So here is a good try to bait here. Problem is that Bleiber then burns his ulti to go in. Really good stop TP by Fudge. But ultimately it means nothing. Oh no, Decoy had to use some of his sums, and Praedyth used his heal. You have now taken away the extra sustain coming from that lane. Fudge does a really good job of nullifying some of the push here. He's still down in the lane. He's still having a hard time in this lane. He's not going to have a real easy time against Set in this lane, even with the Bramble. I mean, it nullifies a little bit of his power to dive him, but it doesn't nullify the fact that he's going to have him shoved the entire time. Vulcan is still in this lane looking like he wants to go in. They screwed up trying to reset this wave properly, and they take a lot of damage for it, and they don't get to back timer properly as much as they should. Yes, you have now delayed the push and possible reset for Praedyth and Decoy by trying to shove that wave in, but you don't net anything unless you rotate people on the map. There's no longer an objective to take. You've taken the objective, so now you need your people to kind of rotate towards the top river. But as Praedyth and Decoy start to push, some reason Sven and Vulcan stick around for this big-ass wave. If they had backed, they would have missed part of this wave. Oh no, they're already up in XP on ADCs. They're slightly behind on supports, but now they're missing timing of getting up here and going for this rift. Now note, Bleiber did not path somewhere in here. Bleiber's pathing got kind of jacked a little bit, and so his bot side camps are now up again, and he hadn't taken his blue yet, so now he's going for it. And here's the problem I saw with the Perks thing. Cool. Perks did a lot of damage there, but because of where the gravity field is, he can't commit to the kill. He can't commit all in. On top of that, Perks took TP and not Ignite. You were taking a lane bully, and you did not take Ignite. Again, I feel like this is a little bit of disrespect to him, or maybe Perks just thought, you know what, ADCs will outscale the mage here. But to be honest, mages do better with a lot more items. ADCs will also do better with more items, but Tristana is much more about getting early pressure and being able to snowball faster. If she does not snowball, she's okay still, but she's not front-loaded damage. She is more sustained damage, which that is something that I think Cloud9's team comp kind of lacks, is front-loaded damage. They have a lot of sustained damage, but there's a lot of sustain on the side of PGG. They have a lot of ways of just stabilizing. Victor's very good at crowd controlling. You have Pabu, who's also on a good crowd control pick. You have Biopanther on a decent crowd control pick. You have Senna, who's really good at healing and keeping the fights going. Tom Kench, who's good at devouring, also healing up with his shield, keeping the fights going. Pabu decides not to go in for the crab, which I think is smart, because if he did that, he would have just been inting. So Pabu's waiting. They know people are on it. They know that they're going for this rift. They see that there's two of them in mid. So here comes down Biopanther and Pabu. They are there. Cloud9 should be the first ones on the response here. Here's the problem. Chaz is in between them. They're already on to Lilia, who did not back off. Go back and watch this again. Like, if we go back and rewind this real quick. So looky here. You have two people here. You have the numbers advantage. You just need to rotate them up. As soon as you see Biopanther's coming down, you see Pabu. Blabber needs to get the hell out of that pit. He should not be still standing there hitting shit. Like, this is the stupidest play that Blabber could make, is standing behind this rift still. Because, looky here. So they're on it. Yeah, you're going behind it to get the positioning here. And you're faster, so you can get out of the pit easier than Sion. So it makes sense that you're behind it to begin with. But you already have 5 stacks. As soon as Sion spots Pabu, Blabber needs to be moving back towards the mid lane so that his team can get here before they engage. He doesn't. He gets slowed. He smites to heal, but he gets stunned up twice and cannot stop. Fudge does a really good ulti to make sure he doesn't get ultied into them, but now you have lost the Rift Herald, you've given up a kill, you have expended a lot of time and wasted a lot of effort into this. So this is a good engage by Vulcan Perks. Problem is that Chaz still has his flash, because you have yet to put any pressure on him that has threatened him enough to where he has to use his sums. This is a problem that I called out with their composition here. This is a problem with the Tristana pick. Yes, they are putting Vulcan in the right spot to help the Tristana become more aggressive, because Ven does not need help in the bot lane dealing with Decoy or dealing with Praedyth. Both of them really can't do much here. Ven has burnt his ulti and his flash, because now Decoy decided, oh, you have 0 protection on the side of the map. I can just run at you. And for the cost of Ignite, or Exhaust, you can't fight back as Kaisa. You are safe. He can't really kill you as long as you don't let him stun you. But you let him walk up to you first before you backed up. And so now you had to burn your sum. So now Kaisa's not as safe in this lane. He has no ultimate. He has no flash. So now Kaisa cannot be left alone if these two try to go in on him. He can farm under tower just fine. And they can't really dive him. Or they shouldn't be able to dive him. But he can't push up in the lane now. He can't do what he was just doing to him because he misstepped and he forced himself to use summoners to survive. Praedyth does something here that I think is dumb. Standing in this bush right here, if Nautilus just for whatever reason decides to come back to lane this way, and if they just happen to have a ward in that bush, you are dead. You're at least using your flash, but you are most likely dead because you don't have your ultimate and your Tom Kench is nowhere near you to save you. That's just a huge mistake by Praedyth there. It could have been exploited. He's super lucky they didn't have any vision and that they didn't just check the bush to see if you're there. Cloud9 does a good call here. We know Pabu. I think they caught Pabu. The fact that Pabu's camps are down here. So timing-wise, he should be topside. Rotate 4 people here. Sen and Tom Kench are just getting back to lane. They can't really rotate up. Pabu's going to be giving up this tower. And then Pabu does a smart thing. Comes up here with Rift and secures them first turret. Now note, I want you guys to look at turret plates right now real quick. I don't know if you guys can see this. So there's the 3 up here that are about to go away because of the Rift and Biopanther. There's still 5 down here, 5 down here. They've taken 2 of them here. So they're even on plates until this tower goes down. There's still 5 on this mid tower. What has the Tristana done? The Tristana has done absolutely nothing for them. And this isn't like Perks is playing his pick terribly. It's just the agency this pick gives him into Victor is not very good. Yone would have been great. They banned Yone. If they'd picked Yone before they picked Lilia, they would have been in a good spot. Do you think Lilia would have been banned over Yone? Oh, hell no. There's no way they would have been banning Lilia. So if you wanted to play Lilia, there's no reason to have picked Lilia there. If you have a pick in mind, that would have worked better with this composition. Yone would have worked better with this composition. Orianna wouldn't really work because you don't have anybody that gets to that backline to make your ulti that big of a threat. Yes, they're going to be a big moving meat clump, but their backline is going to be just far enough away that an Orianna Shockwave is only going to catch tanks, and that's not going to do a whole lot. If they'd picked Rumble over the Lilia in the spot that they picked it, I think they're still in a good spot there still nonetheless. But again, if Bleiber's not comfortable in the pick, that means why. But now we're looking at Bleiber has a very bad champion pool into this type of composition. So right now, is Cloud9 out of the game? No, not in any way, shape, or form. They have a lot of potential to still come back in this game and get themselves a net advantage. They're not really down a whole lot, right? They're down 900 gold. Sorry, drinking a little bit of water there. But we are running into a problem. Cloud9 has not done something successfully for their comp. You have your Sion, who is playing successfully in the top lane. He is not dying. He's giving up CS. He's giving up a tower. But he's still becoming big and tanky, doing his job, and he's not dying. That's huge. He's not a weakness yet. He's behind, but he's not a weakness. You have Bleiber on Lilia, who's already made one mistake of trying to overextend for a fight on a camp when you know that your two teammates, that are your reinforcements, are not in position. And if you positioned sooner for them to help you, you would not have been dead. And you would have not probably cost your top laner his flash, except to maybe flash and get the kills. You would have probably ended with 2 kills and then a Rift Herald on top of it, but instead you decided to just continue hitting the Rift Herald like they're not a threat, and got yourself killed and forced your top laner to flash, and forced both your mid and your support to have to run away from a fight that you guys should have won because you had numbers advantage at the start of the fight. So, you've already lost some tempo in a team comp that needs you to keep tempo. Sion doesn't really need it. Kai'Sa's okay with it going late. Tristana needs it to gain tempo. She needs to be snowballing. She needs to get an item or so ahead of Victor. Right now, she's only 200 gold up on Victor from a little bit of farm, but that's because that wave hasn't even hit Victor yet. There's still like 12 minions there. He is not actually that far behind CS-wise, which means Tristana does not have an actual substantial lead against him, which means the longer this game goes, the more likely Victor is going to one-shot Trist and potentially one-shot Kai'Sa. And this is going to become very, very bad for your team. Now, you have played it into the point that your team has 2 Drakes, which means you need to start figuring out if your team is going to play in 5 minutes for that next Drake. You have to play for that Drake. You cannot lose that Drake. You lose that Drake, your tempo is destroyed, and the little bit of tempo that you could potentially make from Drake stacking is gone. You already don't have towers, you don't have plates, you are losing in a little bit of gold, and your tempo is off. So, meanwhile, while you're only a little bit gold down, you were down a shit ton of tempo, and Biopanther is now released onto the map. He does not have to keep up here, because it doesn't matter if Sion starts to farm now. He's already been put behind enough, and there's enough tempo created that Sion should have to react to you and help his team. But now you have the agency to move around first and go and make sure your team can force shit, and potentially stop that third Drake from going to Cloud9. So, while, yes, Cloud9 had made a decent play towards the bottom, they respawn by getting the dragon. It is then responded with turret to release your top laner onto the world. Yet again, they try to engage onto the Senna Tahm Kench, and they try to engage on the Senna, because Senna's kind of an enchanter / ADC, which is the person you want to engage on. Tahm Kench keeps her safe. And they try again to re-engage. They get the flash out of Praedyth now, but that doesn't mean anything. Okay, cool, you got her flash. Now you really have to try to commit to getting her, but now your big engage of a Nautilus ulti is gone. If you try to hook, Decoy's going to eat her again. So how's it going to work? What do you gain from this? You gain nothing. You go on cooldowns, and cool, you got her flash, but now they're still pushing back into you, and you're not punishing it, and there's no way for you to punish it. Your ADC decided to stick around for the last 3 or 4 minions here. I'm hoping that's what he needed for his item spike, because now he is functionally getting shoved in under tower by a lane that shouldn't have this much pressure on him because you just burned their ADC's flash. But Vulcan backed for whatever reset. I'm assuming, and you look, and there's not like a huge item reset. He gets maybe some more wards, But that reset doesn't gain you anything. There's no objective on this side of the map. You know that you're not getting ganked because you're too far in the tower. They're not going to risk diving you without Senna having flash. So what is the point of your support resetting and your ADC not resetting? And then your ADC sticks around. Cool, you get a small item spike. You now have your Kraken Slayer. That should be a meaningful item spike. Exception is that you are already behind tempo-wise. You have to find a pick on a Praedyth, or you have to find a way to get Chaz to die. But you've now waited so long on abusing Chaz that his flash is about to come up. The last time you tried to abuse him, you got his flash. His flash is about to come up, which means it's going to be very hard to abuse him again. So you have to go for Praedyth. Praedyth is your only real option of who you can attack. And right here, they don't commit to going after him. I get it. You don't have the ulti from Vulcan right now, but you do have Ignite. Your ulti is almost off of cooldown. He does not have flash, and his Tahm Kench is a little bit too far away that even if he comes to flash eat him, you have the number advantage. You will probably get a kill because Tahm Kench will not be able to get away from you at that point. They should have played aggressive there. Should have gotten some kills. That secures them more damage onto the enemy tower and such. And so the call that I made about, Biopanther can now roam a little bit more freely, and if he's answered by Sion, Sion loses more here. It is now slow pushing back into Biopanther, which means he can kind of capture this wave and then have it push back into Sion. So if Sion wants to get the farm, he has to go back to top now, which means he cannot assist his team in setting up fights. Now, note, we have 2 minutes to the dragon. There shouldn't be a fight coming out here from Cloud9's side until that dragon, but they need to keep this control that they have of the vision in the river. If they lose this vision at any point, they lose this vision line that they have going here, they can lose the dragon. Note, though, this vision line in the river, while it's super important, they have 0 vision into the bot side jungle. So they don't know where the approach could be coming from PGG. They just know if PGG is there in the river. They now have a lot of wards in their bot lane because they're afraid that they're going to get attacked, even though they're the aggressive team. They have the aggressive comp. You have a much more passive comp on Tahm Kench Senna, and yet you are paying them so much respect like they're going to kick your ass. Senna does not have flash still. She has heal. Sure, Decoy has exhaust and flash. Pabu has flash stun. The last time you saw Pabu was on the bot side of the map somewhere, but you have no vision in this quadrant here. And this quadrant is very important for taking dragon control. Your vision has already started to die away or clear out here in the river, so it's good that Vulcan went back, but he now has to reclaim a lot more vision than he had before. And it's possible that, hey, Rift's up. Hopefully they're just going to trade him to get Rift and give us the 3rd dragon. Watch and see what happens here. So they give up the Rift for free. There's still 30 seconds for Pabu to get down to the other side of the map to go contest this dragon. Praedyth is already in mid lane. He's taking a little bit of damage, but note, at this point, Praedyth, while he has the damage items, is the support. So Praedyth being here means that they can gain control. This Rift then says, hey, we're going to threaten to take your mid tower, which is huge, because that gives you a ton of tempo as a team into the mid game here. So Vulcan gets a good hook on a Chaz. Problem is, there is nobody there to follow him up. You have Blabber, you have Perks. You have Fudge is not there to be a secondary engage. Blabber can't really go in because, well, the Lilia, like I said, previously had the same problems. If she gets hit by a Senna slow or any type of CC or Pabu stuns her, she dies. And they need this dragon. So even though it's a really good hook onto Chaz, it's a really bad timed hook because you have nobody there to help you. Kai'Sa is not in range to ulti in and try to kill him, and even if she does, there's too many members of them there to kill you, and then you end up losing your mid laner because of it, and your own life. So you now have given 2 kills, a Rift Herald, and a Dragon, and now your mid tower as well to it. Biopanther is overextended here, you could get a free kill back here, and it almost goes badly for them. Like, Perks gets put under half HP. If for whatever reason, and note, also, here, this fight is a good one to kind of punish Biopanther for overextending a little bit, but you now know Pabu's right here. You don't know who else is in this river, and you don't know who's in their jungle. If for whatever reason Pabu goes back in there, he could potentially bluff them to back off, or get a kill back, if his team was closer. Now, no, PGG wasn't, so they can't punish the punish, but, that is a misstep by Biopanther. But it is also a really risky over punish by C9. They expended a lot there. You no longer have TP on Perks, so he can't go splitting as easily. Now, there's not any objective for another 2 minutes, so he could still potentially split here, which is why he comes down here to help Sion with the tower. You have still yet to move that mid tower, which means that enemy jungle that he just crossed through is actually really dangerous for him to be in. He's not afraid of the threats, which is just a sign of Perks' confidence in this game. But, like, that is a very ballsy roam by him because of the fact that that mid tower is up. If they noticed him walking in there, even though Vulcan's not far behind him, all he has is Vulcan. Chaz is unknown. Pabu is unknown on the map. And both of their bot lane was in mid. You could have been collapsed and killed before going to that tower. Like, just could have happened. They're lucky it isn't, but I mean, I think, it's not like a big mistake that would have cost them a ton. Like I said, there's no objectives. They might have lost another tower or something, but that's still more gold that you're getting into the pocket there. And they risk it just to get the first tower for themselves. Their first tower for themselves. It's not even the first tower. This weird-ass fight is just a showcase that both of these teams are... I don't know what's going on with both of these teams. Like, PGG is feeling like they can just kind of do whatever they want. And they honestly can. They are up 2k gold. They have a lot more tempo on the map. Cool, Perks is on the bot side of the map. He does not have TP. So if we just shove this in, Perks can't get here, which is fine. This is why they call back Praedyth and Pabu. It's like, hey, there's only 2 people here. Even if more people show up, we could potentially do this. Bio, I think, goes in a little too soon, but now they're going to get the tower. Like, he used his ulti to deny them to be able to get the fight in. Here comes the Fudge attack onto Chaz, and a similar issue just occurred. He put down his thing. He put down his gravity field, which made it really hard for them to get onto him to begin with. Decoy flashes in, eats him, gets him out of there. Chaz is still above half HP in this fight, and the only person you have now gotten is Pabu. You have to burn Perks' flash because he overextends to try to get Bio, and Chaz puts down a gravity field again. This is still extremely difficult for C9 to get into the fight because of the champion disadvantage they have here. They don't have a good, solid damage from afar type of comp. Tristana has to get into the fight. Kai'Sa has to get into the fight. Lilia has to get into the fight. Nautilus and Sion are going into the fight. Meanwhile, PGG just has to kind of disengage, and Chaz is going to do a ton of damage. Praedyth's going to do a ton of damage. Biopanther can then re-engage with one of their tanks overstepping and ulting them into the enemy team. So look at this fight again. Look at this. So Chaz gets hit by the Fudge ulti. He had put his gravity field down just in time to stop him from being hit. Lilia has to burn her Zonias and her flash, so she does not have a flash to go in on an enemy team on another engage. Sven burns a flash just to kill Babu. They lost a tower, they get a kill back. They then lose Perks' flash to try to make sure he doesn't die. So you are now down 4 flashes from that one fight, and you got 1 kill for it and lost a tower. You went on a net neutral trade gold-wise, and you lose so much for that fight. The flashes that they got from that fight, Tom Kench, and they got Chaz. Or not Chaz, and Pabu, and I think they got Praedyth's heal and flash as well. So, like, you'd think, oh, they're summoner-wise, they're pretty close, right? Not even. Chaz still has his TP. Bio has his TP. Bio's flash is about to come up. While Perks' TP is only about 15-20 seconds away now, you still have double TP advantage, double flash advantage on the solo laners. Fudge can use his ulti to run away, but if he uses his ulti to run away, you don't have him engaging on any fights. They're giving up these 2 outer towers because they don't add any real pressure to the map in the current map state. Bio gets this other outer tower, which now all outer towers are down for C9, and because that one in the mid lane is open, is still up for PGG, PGG is very safe in assuming that they can just get this dragon without any consequence. They can't, there's nothing Cloud9 can do now other than go and try to contest this dragon because they're not there soon enough to push this wave to then be able to take the tower. So there's no pressure there. They can't really get there to come pressure this because unlike Cloud9's attempt to set up for that 3rd Drake, PGG on the 4th Drake have a ton of vision up into the bottom quadrant here of Cloud9's jungle, which then says, we know when you're coming. So if there were a threat, our team would rotate sooner. And they don't need to. There is no threat. There's nothing that they can do. Perks is now pushing into the jungle topside by himself. They don't really have any vision here, but they know everybody's on the bot side, so this isn't that big a deal. Now, he calls for assistance from Vulcan to make sure that he's still safe because they don't know where Chaz went. And he's hoping he finds Chaz doing camps or something. And maybe they can go in and get a kill on him. Victor still has flash, which they should know, unless they haven't been tracking it. But they yet to put enough pressure on this Victor that he doesn't get to scale. He's at 2 items here. Perks is also at 2 items. I value the Chaz's freaking Victor at 2 items more so than a Tristana at 2 items, just off of the team compositions here. If Tristana jumps in and Bio hasn't used his ulti, he can just ulti your back out. She gets no damage and gets to do no damage in that fight. He slows her team. He can potentially do a lot of CC there. And it's a lot of damage that's going to come across then because they're all going to be grouped up and Chaz can drop an ulti or an E on them. Like, Victor offers so much in these team fights that Cloud9 doesn't have. So right now, Cloud9 is slightly behind because compositionally, they did not account for the fact that PGG could actually play their comp. PGG had been sloppy in this tournament, but like they still showcased that they are competitors. Like I can't really say world-class competitors. I don't think they have a real shot ever of winning worlds right now with this current team. But they are competitors on an international stage here, and they got here for a reason of that they kind of understand their comp there. Look at that. Vulcan tries to engage again. Decoy eats Praedyth. Praedyth jumps out on the other side. Decoy gets ultied by Blabber. It's a one-man ulti. It's a waste of Blabber's ulti. They are now way out of position here. Blabber dies because, like I said, if he gets slowed or stunned, Blabber's doomed. He had the Zonias to try to survive. He's dead. They have now collected 3 kills because they have now overextended on Cloud9's side. Let's go back to that fight, and I'll break it down a little bit more because I was in the middle of saying something else. So Decoy and Praedyth look like they're overextending here. Here's the problem. They separate slightly so that only one of them gets hit and goes to sleep. It's Decoy. Guess what? You're not going to kill Decoy with just a freaking, with just the deer and just Sven. Sven then has Biopanther, and both of the TPs are up, and Bio happened to be in the area, so he didn't even have to expend it. He just burns Flash ulti to kill. And because of the positioning here, like, let's go back just a little bit more back to the fight here. So the biggest mistake here is that Cloud9 decide we have to go for this fight, right? They have no flashes other than Vulcan's. Vulcan's hook misses, which means he is not in the part of the fight that they need. Sion is stopping Biopanther, which is cool, except for the fact that he has flash and he has the ability to then just dash in there with his amazing item of his. And you just watch as the exact problem that Lilia presents with their comp is that she is super squishy, and if she gets slowed or stunned, she is screwed. She got slowed, so she put Zonias to try to give her team some time to reposition around her, but her team then fell apart, which meant she was stuck in the middle of the enemy team without any summoners to get out. Your whole team is dead, you lose Baron, you are now massively behind. You are 5 kills behind, you are 2 turrets behind. The enemy team, who does not have to engage into you, now gets a free Baron. You are not out of this game, but your way back into this game is extremely, extremely hard to find. Because now you have to find a pick. But guess what? They still have 1 TP in the way of Biopanther. They have Flash still on Chaz, Flash still on Breda, Flash still on Decoy, Flash on Pabu. Cool. Your flashes are back up too, but you are also just down so much tempo and so much resources in comparison. You then now burn your TP to try to come and stop a person who was potentially pushing, but you had nobody there to make sure that they get locked in and stayed there. So you just wasted your only TP, like your TP advantage potentially. And now you were equal on TPs. Perks can't go answer Set. If Set just decides to go in on Perks, he has to run. And you don't want Triss split pushing at this point in the game. Like, you have to have him split pushing because that's your only real chance of getting anything. Because in team fights, you're not going to win it. You just can't. You don't have the possible engage for it unless Blabber can get some hero 5-man stun with his 5-man sleep. But then even then, who's going to go in and do all the damage? If Perks jumps in and tries to kill one of them and he does not kill that person and the rest of them get up and turn on him, Perks is dead. Like, there's just not enough that this comp has to fight in a 5v5 right now. You have drafted for a 5v5, but you have kind of screwed yourself in the fact that one of your picks is not going to work nearly as well in a 5v5 at this point in the game as the other lane, because you did not punish him. You did not punish the Victor, so you do not deal with the weakness of him. Blabber then flashes forward here and gets a 1-man sleep to try to kill Pabu. It's worthless. They try so hard to get a kill on the enemy jungler and don't manage to do it. Blabber doesn't have flash now. He doesn't have his Zonias. Perks has to back off. They all have to back off. Cool. You got Biopanther's ulti, or his TP, but you have nothing left. Here comes a late Sion ulti from Fudge. This does absolutely nothing. Oh no, here he comes. We're already backing off, so it doesn't matter. You've now lost an additional 2 towers. You are massively behind gold, massively behind tempo, and this is just kind of Cloud9 playing poorly and drafting poorly. This is the importance of draft picking, right? Like, Cloud9 is on red side. They should be counter picking PGG, but instead they went with their own composition that then just gets counter picked by PGG's comp. Like, you didn't respect PGG's comp and ability to play it, and you cost your team the game by giving yourself a handicap at the beginning of the game by drafting like this. Their draft has some cohesion together, but its cohesiveness just gets dismantled by the cohesiveness of PGG's team comp. You can see it on Vulcan's face there. They needed to get those kills, but as he tried to flash, they had no way to get to them. If he had waited, instead of trying to flash onto the Senna there, and waited for Decoy to get stunned first, and then hooked Decoy, they might have been able to get a kill there, because you then have your big old tank stopping Biopanther on the side for long enough that you might be actually able to kill Tahm Kench if you can CC lock him long enough. But they don't have the CC to lock him down anymore because you just burned your flash hook and missed it. And so now your engage is down, your jungler doesn't have his ulti, you don't have enough damage aspect to potentially take this fight and win it because everybody's basically healthy on the enemy team. And now you've also lost another dragon. So now PGG's on soul point. Cloud9 has to find some type of miracle way to get back into this game. Their only real way is getting a Baron for themselves or finding a pick. So PGG, if they stick together roaming as groups, like, they're pretty safe. Or if they put their, side laners to answer waves at points where they can't really be punished, kind of like how they have Chaz right now answering that wave. Chaz gets some farm. He's not able to get punished. Pabu's kind of in the area. He's going to be kind of the early alert system because he's really fast. So at least that's the advantage that this Udyr adds at this point in the game. Because mind you, Udyr doesn't really do much at this point in the game other than being a bear slap every now and then. He's super fast. So he just kind of run around in areas that you don't have a whole lot of vision because of you also know that there's not a whole lot of things that the enemy team can do to kill you. They have to flash and stuff, and then Decoy is on level 13, which means he has a level 2 ulti, which means he has a miniature TF ulti available to come save you. So, there's no real threat of Udyr dying, so Udyr can just run around getting information. And because of that, PGG gets to just push it back up here to Cloud9 side of the map. They get to start taking all their camps. They get to start starving Blabber, which is really bad for them because that's really their only magic damage. So Cloud9 has 0 front-loaded damage, has a ton of sustained damage, but no real way to get into these fights because they didn't draft any backline dive threat, mind you. They banned the Renekton, who is a backline dive threat. They opted into a Fudge, who is cool. He's an engaged tank that engages into tanks that say, no, you don't get to go in here. Like, you have no backline threat in your comp, and yet, meanwhile, Set is a massive backline threat because your backline keeps trying to dive into his, so he just stuns them and ults one of them out. What is Cloud9 to do here? This is just simply, what does Cloud9 do here? I'm only kind of reiterating what's happening in the game. I get that, but you have to understand that this is fundamental problems in their drafting, and then they made mistakes on what they could have done early. If Cloud9 had punished Chaz early, like how they got his flash early was good. They then just needed to repeat gank him a couple times, even if they dove tower and kill him. And then Perks gets to get a couple plates. And guess what? If Perks gets that tower, Perks gets to roam around and help get the side lanes. And they can't really stop him because once you're at Senna and Tahm Kench's tower, they can't really stop you from pushing their tower. They can try to hurt you, but like early on, they're not going to do enough to really stop you if you have 2 ADCs taking their tower. They're not good at that. That's not what their comp's good for. Even if Pabu comes to help, then Blabber can be there. And they have a lot of damage threat. They have a lot of dive threat with the Nautilus, Lilia, and Trist. So you just had to gain early tempo. But Cloud9 handshaked early on and gave up that early tempo for free. And PGG's like, okay, that doesn't matter to us. We have Senna, who's going to outscale your ADC. We have Victor, who's going to outscale your mid laner. And then we have 2 frontliners in Pabu and Decoy who are just going to prevent you from going into our team or protecting our backline or something of the sort. And then Biopanther to do this, to just be a bit more damage version of doing the same. So what PGG does here as a mistake is that they They peel off of the Baron here to go save their tier 1 and look for a fight. Bio is in, but his team is not in position to help him. So they can get punished pretty hard in this fight right here. Pabu is now really low and can't really get back into this fight. You get hit by a giant Lilia ulti, which is exactly what Blibber needed to do, and PGG is forced off of the map. Cloud9 should rush over immediately to try to go take this Baron. They're going to take the first tier tower, and I think they then rotate over to go do this because they're just backing some people to make sure they have HP. You have TP for your Scion. Here comes a TP coming in from Chaz, I think is who this is. Bio's coming in first. Chaz hasn't backed yet, so he hasn't even TP'd in yet. But Bio's here just to make sure that there's nobody trying to do this. Cloud9 has lost a little bit of positioning for this, and they have to find a fight now. But Cloud9 just proved they have possibilities to do this, but their possibility is coming in the form of the enemy team messing up, right? Like, Bio went in a little bit too soon before his team was in position to help him, and nearly cost them the fight, which could have cost them the Baron, which could have then given Cloud9 an avenue to win this game. So Cloud9 is now going to this Baron. Cloud9 has to start this Baron. Cloud9 has to run it down. They have a ton of sustain damage, and because of the fact that they do good against tanks with their team comp, right? Blabber, Sven, and Perks all do really well into tanky stuff. They can just burn down Baron really, really fast. So as soon as the enemy team is trying to come in here, they don't have Biopanther's ulti to really engage here, so their comp's kind of crap at engaging. Biopanther's ulti comes up, but by that time, they've already kind of lost a lot of health on Pabu. Pabu ends up dying, Biopanther goes in and gets killed. So because of the last fight that Biopanther initiated, he lost his team to Baron, and this could be very detrimental for them in the game. Here's something that they do notice, is they got Cloud9 all really low. Cloud9 used every TP that is available to them because they killed Budge, so there's no way that even if they had wards that they could get down here in time to contest this, and this gives your team soul, which now means that the Baron that the enemy team just got is now somewhat nullified by the fact that you now do a crap ton more damage than you did before, and they can't really deal with that. Cloud9 has a lot of squishy members on it. As we had highlighted before, 3 out of their 5 members are squishy, opposed to the 3 out of 5 on the other side that are tanks. Well, yes, you have good tank disruption. One of those bruisery tanky guys also does a ton of damage. And the other 2 are just really good at peeling and stunning and stuff. Cloud9 comes down here and gets a lot of vision control again. It's just kind of standard crap that you're going to do when you have nothing else you can do. And even though they have Baron, they can't push. People are starting to come up. And your biggest tank isn't even on the map right now. So you're just kind of in a spot that, yeah, we got the Baron here, cool. Yeah, we got 4-man with Baron. We have double ADC. But we can't go to the enemy tower because if we push too hard into them, they'll just kill us. Because they have soul. And they already did more damage than us. Even though we have more damage dealers. Because we waited too long and our damage dealers don't do nearly as much as theirs. Because we get outranged. And theirs just do a lot more burst. And we don't do burst. We have to do sustain, and we have to get kind of close range, and that's just problematic. You see a recurring theme here. Cloud9 has to get close to do damage. Cloud9 can't get close to do damage because Cloud9's in a bad spot from draft alone. Cloud9 does a decent job of trying to keep themselves in here, but they've already screwed themselves comp-wise from the draft. And then on top of that, they then execute poorly in the early game, which means that they're in a kind of harder spot into the mid game. And then from there on out, in their mid game, they have to find the mistakes that PGG presents, but then they don't always capitalize on. PGG made a couple of mistakes that I pointed out earlier, but Cloud9 then didn't capitalize on it, which meant that PGG just kind of gets away with it and gets to scale. So we're at a point here. The gold gap is not relevant in the slightest, right? PGG has kept a gold lead, but now it's only about 1,000 ahead. Means nothing's happening. Nobody has a real big advantage, except for the fact that tempo-wise, PGG is still massively ahead. Cloud9 has no outer towers, no inner towers. They're on Nexus towers. They have a Baron, and they can't even push. Because if they overextend and PGG catch a single one of their members, Cloud9 loses the game. Now, Cloud9 sees Pabu here. They get a lot of damage on the Pabu, but now they know that there's 3 people of Cloud9 here, and Cloud9 has to get away. But they can't. Because, well, they're in a really bad spot. And this is the exact problem of why they couldn't push with a Baron. Their Baron is now off, and they've lost 2 members of their team, and they're about to lose a third. And, if Pabu can get onto Perks, they lose Perks as well. And that's it. That's all she wrote. Like, you were now down to Perks and Bleiber. Perks has to jump back over here to try to delay them in some way or another. He manages to get all of his autos onto Pabu because nobody turns to him soon enough, and nobody has, like, two people have flashes, but neither of their flashes would have really changed it. So Chaz is now chasing Perks to kill him off, potentially. Perks is doing pretty good damage here because Chaz is not built to chase Perks. If you chase Perks as Chaz, you could get yourself killed. If he did not have Decoy there, he couldn't do that. But even if Chaz dies there, they delay Perks long enough that they can for sure get the inhib and potentially threaten for the end of there. With Chaz not dying, though, he could TP to the minion and make that minion tank. They now get Bleiber. Bleiber gets a one-man ulti. Vulcan goes immediately back to the grave because Chaz comes back. He has some money. And with like that, that's how PGG wins, guys. They just end the game now. Cloud9 overstepped. They saw Pabu. They put a little too much damage on Pabu. And they hung around thinking maybe it's just Pabu. Just a split second too long to then get punished a couple seconds later by a re-engage of a team that should not be able to engage on you, but they're so far ahead that it doesn't matter. Gold-wise, it didn't look like they're that far ahead, but with Soul, it doesn't matter that you have Baron. Your Baron didn't net you that much, so you have a 1k gold advantage. With a Soul static buff, when the Baron falls off, you are now like about another 1,000 or 2 ahead of the enemy team, so you're actually like 3k ahead. And on top of that, the money that they are ahead are on their carries. There are two people that matter, have damage to them. And then their third off-tank, off-damage dealer is also really ahead as well. So there's just nothing Cloud9 can do. They have opted into a draft and then shook hands where they shouldn't have. They shook hands in top, which made sense. That's what they drafted to do. They got kind of screwed with their picks for bot because they got countered with the Tahm Kench Senna. So they should have moved Nautilus into mid to use Perks' ability to push and siege early to then be able to rotate him around and continue doing that pressure. But they didn't. So now they have to go for the dragon. But then they didn't set up vision for the dragon. So then because they didn't set up vision for the dragon, the enemy team could come into the river and actually contest the dragon. And then guess what? They actually, I think they get a killed twice. 2 people die there before that dragon, so they just give up that dragon anyways. So now your dragon stacking is not there. You haven't got either of the rifts, so you're off tempo on the map. Even though you get your 2 side towers, you haven't been able to crack the mid tower. It's not until way late in the game that you actually crack the mid tower, and by that point, you're already down another 3 towers. So, just gold did not matter nearly as much in this game as like a lot of people try to make it look, right? Like, it wasn't like this was a super high kill intense game in terms of like, oh man, they're trading back and forth, they're all killing each other, blah 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 blah. You strictly saw PGG play to the fact that if we go to late game, Victor is going to outrange and burst out those ADCs before they can do anything. Senna's going to outrange them and burst them out before they can do anything. She's going to be able to kite them. She's going to be able to hurt their tanks, and she's going to make it so Lilia can't come in. So all of that included, so all of that together just nets that Cloud9 is on a timer to make something happen, to gain an advantage, so that if they have an advantage, it becomes harder for PGG to play back. You know, they still have that scaling option, but PGG loses more. Cloud9 gains more. Cloud9 has a chance to take Dragon Soul, has a chance to force for an Elder, has a chance to get a Baron and actually use it aggressively. The Baron they got was able to try to survive, but they were already so behind at this point, just tempo-wise, that they had to find a pick, but there was nothing for them to pick. I keep getting these amazing screen stops. Earlier it was Pabu doing this like face, and now it's Captain Flowers looking like he's terrified of me. It's amazing. But if you take a look at this game, it comes down to Cloud9 not executing how they needed to win this. PGG didn't just like, completely outplay Cloud9 throughout all of it. Cloud9 played so badly, blah, 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 blah. Cloud9 just didn't execute. It was Cloud9 outplaying themselves in many of these scenarios. Cloud9 had chances to gain advantages and did not take them. They didn't execute on the fact that, hey, we got Chaz's Flash here. Yeah, I get it. Bleiber died for the freaking rift up here, and then we lose third Drake because of it later, and we lose a rift, and then we lose a tower. Well, actually, that rift didn't matter for the dragon. That was a different fight, but you lose a kill, and then he gets rift, and then we get second dragon, but then they get first tower, and now they've released their set onto the map. They just don't have tempo. And tempo is a big important thing, and in pro play, they should be able to identify how they can gain and keep tempo, and Cloud9 just didn't seem to be able to execute on that in any way, shape, or form this game. They seemed to struggle. They seemed to have issues identifying where they needed to go in, when they needed to go in, how and who. Their target selection was poor. Their ability to go in shouldn't have been as poor as it was. They got a few fights where it looked like they could have won it from there, but they were too afraid to, push in. And because they didn't get the first tier tower, they couldn't actually commit to it without threatening dying to the tower. So you're at a point here that because they didn't take that early aggression to get the mid tower, they actually could not execute in the mid-game team fights nearly as well. There was a lot more safety net there for PGG that Cloud9 could not execute into nearly as well. So, summary of all of this. Cloud9 played poorly. PGG didn't play like gods. They did play well. Don't get me wrong. Don't have me saying like, oh, PGG's terrible. They don't deserve to win this. PGG played what they needed to do and they won because of it. But Cloud9 also did not play to how they needed to win, and they did not execute in ways to punish PGG's comp. PGG needed to get to the late game to win. Prior to that, early on, they don't have the damage to sustain against those two ADCs. But Cloud9 did not force it. Lilia does decent damage early on too, mind you. So Cloud9 had the potential early game to do something. But they were too afraid to actually execute it. They were too afraid that they would fall behind. I'm assuming after Blabber died at Rift, they were just too afraid at that point, like, oh, we're gonna, if we do that again and we die again, we lose. But because of, I'm assuming based off of that has to be the reasoning for it, right? Like they have to be too afraid to execute, which then because they're too afraid to execute, they don't, you miss every shot you don't take type of thing. And that's kind of what it felt like. And they just stopped taking the fights that mattered. And then when they finally did try to execute, they managed to win one fight, but not in enough commanding presence to actually like get anything from it. Their Baron meant nothing. They won the Baron, they got a kill, but it did nothing. It didn't stop the enemy team from getting soul. It didn't get you any more towers. It actually lost you the game in the end because you are now out of position to do anything on the map. You don't have any wave pressure. You don't have any management of anything. And it all boils down to the fact that they also just drafted poorly. So hopefully this video is somewhat insightful for you guys. Hopefully my takes on things aren't, super negative for you guys. I get it. It's not great hearing why NA is not doing well, but ultimately it's not because we are worse players, mind you. We lost to a team that I think is weaker as a team, but strictly because Cloud9 didn't play as a team. They didn't play to execute properly. They didn't show trust in each other, right? Like, Blabber previously would go in with Licorice and do all types of crazy crap with Licorice and stuff because they trusted each other so much. It doesn't look like Blabber trusts Fudge nearly as much. It doesn't look like he trusts Perks nearly as much. It doesn't look like Perks... It looks like Perks and Vulcan have some trust built for each other. Sven obviously trusts Vulcan. So, like, the bot side of their map seems to trust each other. But for some reason, their jungler's not synergizing super well, it feels, into their team, and it doesn't feel like Blabber has anybody to kind of rely on. And so Blabber feels like he can't make these plays, but then he tries to make these plays, and it doesn't look like any of his team is willing to help him. And maybe it's because he is showcased that his timing and stuff like that doesn't fit to the strategy that the rest of the team kind of wants to play to. And that's not saying he's a bad player. I'm just saying he's probably just not meshing with these two solo laners nearly as well as he did with his previous ones, right? Like, when he played with Niski was the one that helped enable him. When he played with Licorice, he was willing to play either the guy that gets enabled or the guy that gives up his stuff to enable you. So when you had two enablers on the top side of the map, you have a way of making Blabber look phenomenal. Perks is very good at playing for his team, but that being said, he has a more calculated approach of how to play for his team. He played with somebody like Jankos, who I think is a better version of Blabber. And he has let Jankos die, and Jankos has then learned over time, I can't always take these fights, because Perks won't always go in with me. But when he thinks it's a good fight, that's a fight we're going to win. Blabber just seems to have not earned that trust yet, or maybe he hasn't learned what that timing is. And I think under the tutelage with Perks there, he has a chance to do this. And I think they have a good chance of making a better showing at Worlds. The fact that they were able to beat Dom1 and they were able to beat RNG showcases that they have the ability to beat world-class teams. This loss to PGG also shows that anybody can lose to somebody who is considered a massive, massive underdog. Just because if you don't respect your opponent and if you don't play with confidence, you have a good chance of losing. And it definitely looked in this game that Cloud9 was very much teetering that maybe they were just under the stress of the fact that they had to win this game to have a chance into the semis. Maybe it was that they were just underestimating them. There's so many things that could be factors to this that it's not saying that Cloud9 is bad all the time, but they definitely did not play and execute properly. And congratulations to PGG who did. PGG played to their comp, they played to what they needed to do. And this showcases two separate things. Lesser regions can do well when given too much, given too much respect that or treated like you can't lose to them, and then they showcase something early that makes you teeter a little bit. I think PGG played on the fact that they were underdogs to win this game a bit too. That early kill was a lot of aggression that I was not expecting when I first watched this game when it was live to see them do. But then when I rewatched it, it is a mistake by Blabber, ultimately, but it is also a very good execution by them. Just because something is a mistake doesn't make the other thing not a good execution either. So yeah, guys, that's my take on this video. And I hope you guys enjoy this. And I'm going to be trying to make more analysis videos like this. They hopefully won't all be an hour and a half long, but I'm very long-winded and I like talking about things. And so hopefully you guys enjoyed this. And I hope to see you guys in the next video. Goodbye now.